Roy Ashley designed the landscape for the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. He built gardens at Disney's Wilderness Lodge in Orlando and the Grand Californian in Anaheim. He was a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects. That is their highest honor. But if you asked Roy what he actually was, he would tell you the same thing every time. I am a tractor man. On his farm in White Plains, Georgia, Roy kept over 30 antique tractors and an 8,000-square-foot personal museum he built with his own hands. And one day, he got a phone call from a friend named Frank Burke in South Carolina, who told him there was a 65-ton Allis-Chalmers HD-41 sitting beside some railroad tracks in Allendale County. The ripper was already gone. Somebody had already cut it off and sold it for scrap metal. The rest of the machine was next. The scrapyard had priced the steel at $10,000. Roy drove down from Georgia. He paid cash. He got the engine running, and he hauled the largest production bulldozer of the 1970s back to his farm on a flatbed trailer. He showed it at tractor pulls for the next decade. He named it after himself. And then, in June 2015, Roy Ashley died. Which is when this story gets complicated, because the machine Roy saved was not just rare. It was one of fewer than a dozen Allis-Chalmers HD-41s believed to survive anywhere on the planet. And the place where he found it, rusting beside those railroad tracks in rural South Carolina, sits within miles of one of the most secretive industrial facilities in American history. The Savannah River Site, America's plutonium bomb factory. We wanted to know how the world's largest bulldozer ended up parked next to a nuclear weapons plant, so we pulled every source we could find. And what we found was not just the story of a machine. It was the story of a company that built something too big for any engine on Earth, waited 7 years for someone to fix that problem, held the world record for less than a decade, and then vanished. Here is what actually happened. In 1963, Allis-Chalmers wheeled a prototype crawler tractor onto the floor of the Chicago Road Show. It was enormous. The blade was 22 feet wide. The tracks were taller than most of the men standing next to them. And at over 60 tons, it was heavier than anything Caterpillar had ever built. There was one problem. The engine bay was empty. No diesel motor on the market in 1963 could produce enough horsepower to move it. Allis-Chalmers had built the frame, the transmission, and the undercarriage, but they had no engine. So the biggest bulldozer ever designed went back to the factory in Springfield, Illinois, and sat there for 7 years. If you want to see how they solved that problem and where Big Roy ended up after the man who saved it died, like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. During those 7 years, Allis-Chalmers engineers tested everything they could get their hands on. They even built their own V12 diesel from scratch. It accumulated 50,000 hours on the dynamometer and 16,000 hours in the field. It could reportedly make 1,200 horsepower, but it was not ready for production in time. Only about 58 of those Allis-Chalmers V12 engines were ever built, and most of them ended up in generator sets, not bulldozers. The engine that finally made the HD-41 possible came from Cummins. The VT1710C was a twin turbocharged 60-degree V12, displacing 1,710 cubic inches, 524 horsepower. Think of it as 2 of their proven inline 6-cylinder blocks bolted together on a shared crankcase. It was not custom, but it was exactly big enough. In 1970, the Allis-Chalmers HD-41 went into full production at the Springfield, Illinois factory. It weighed 129,000 pounds. It was over 20 feet long, 11 feet wide, and 13 feet tall. When Frank Burke stood next to it years later, the tops of the tracks hit him at his shoulders. He is 5'9". For the next 7 years, it was the biggest production bulldozer on the planet. Allis-Chalmers sold roughly 1,900 of them under their own name between 1970 and 1974. The machine went into coal strip mines, interstate highway projects, and heavy earth-moving jobs across the United States and Australia. But Allis-Chalmers was bleeding money. In 1974, the Italian conglomerate Fiat bought a 65% controlling stake in the construction equipment division. The HD prefix was dropped. The machine became the Fiat Allis-41B. Another 764 of those were built through 1982. Total production across both versions comes to roughly 2,664 machines worldwide. By the mid-70s, the world's largest title was already gone. Caterpillar launched the D10 in 1977 with 700 horsepower and an elevated sprocket drive that changed the entire industry. Komatsu came in with the D455A. The HD-41 had ruled for 7 years. Then it was over. Like and subscribe if you want more stories like this. Tell us in the comments if you have ever operated one of these machines. In October 1985, Fiat Allis closed the Springfield, Illinois factory for good. 1,700 people lost their jobs. At its peak in the 1960s, that plant had employed 6,500 workers, building some of the most powerful crawlers in the world. Today, the 70-acre property between 6th and 11th Streets is substantially vacant brownfield. The most accurate description anyone has written about it is 6 words long. Allis-Chalmers, then Fiat Allis, then nothing. So how did one of these machines end up beside railroad tracks in Allendale County, South Carolina? When Frank Burke stripped the paint during his restoration, he found something underneath, a decal that read Miller Brothers Construction. He called the company in Ohio. Miller Brothers started in 1945 as a part-time ditch-digging outfit run by 2 brothers, Dale and Floyd. By the 1970s, they were a heavy highway contractor building roads across the Midwest. During one of those jobs, their crews struck a vein of coal. That coal led to a strip mining subsidiary. And that subsidiary almost certainly led to the purchase of an HD-41, because a 65-ton dozer with a 22-foot blade is exactly what you buy when you need to move overburden off a coal seam. At some point, the machine was sold again, and it ended up at the Savannah River Site. We need to be honest here. The connection between Big Roy and the Savannah River nuclear plant is Frank Burke's suspicion, not a documented fact. He found the dozer in Allendale County. The Savannah River Site spans parts of Aiken, Barnwell, and Allendale counties. The proximity is real, but we could not find a single Department of Energy document, contractor equipment ledger, or DuPont archive record that names this specific machine on site. What we can tell you about the Savannah River Site is this. In 1950, the federal government chose 310 square miles of South Carolina farmland along the Savannah River to build a nuclear weapons production facility. More than 6,000 people were forced out of their homes. Entire towns such as Ellenton, Dunbarton, Hawthorne, and Myers Mill were erased from the map. Residents were given 15 months to leave. 5 heavy water reactors went up between 1951 and 1954. Over the next 35 years, those reactors produced 36 metric tons of plutonium for the American nuclear weapons stockpile. To this day, Savannah River remains the sole source of tritium for every nuclear warhead in the United States arsenal. Whether Big Roy moved dirt inside that fence or outside it, we do not know. But it sat within miles of the facility for years, rusting beside those tracks, with the ripper already gone and the scrapyard circling. Then Roy Ashley showed up, and then Roy Ashley died. After Roy's death in 2015, His entire equipment collection went to an estate auction. The HD-41 was part of the lot. It could move forward and backward, but it could not turn. The clutches were seized. Frank Burke went to that auction. He had been the one who originally spotted the dozer in Allendale County years earlier. He had made the phone call that sent Roy down to save it, and now he was not going to let it go to a scrapper a second time. Frank bought it. He had it hauled to a construction yard in Walterboro, South Carolina, where he spent the next 2 years working on it. He replaced fluids and filters, freed the clutches, and got it turning again. And then came the question of where to put a 65-ton bulldozer permanently. Frank is a member of the Low Country Antique Tractor and Engine Association. They lease farmland in a community called Adams Run, about 30 miles west of Charleston. He decided to donate Big Roy to the club, but getting it there was its own engineering problem. The South Carolina Department of Transportation calculated the weight, looked at the shortest route, and said no. The bridge could not handle it. So the transport crew from Superior Transportation in North Charleston loaded Big Roy onto a trailer with 13 axles and 52 wheels, distributing the weight so that no single axle bore more than 20,000 pounds, and drove it the long way around on 2 interstate highways to reach Adams Run. Today, Big Roy sits under a metal canopy at the Low Country Antique Tractor and Engine Association grounds. It dwarfs 2 1951 Caterpillar D8 tractors parked on either side of it. Frank added Big Roy decals on both sides in honor of his friend. The engine still fires right up. The factory where this machine was built is empty. The company that designed it does not exist. The nuclear weapons plant it may have worked beside is still being cleaned up, decades later, at a cost of billions of dollars. But the machine that was too big for its own engine, the one that held the world record for 7 years before Caterpillar and Komatsu buried Allis-Chalmers forever, that machine is still running in a field in South Carolina, under Spanish moss, named after a landscape architect who called himself a tractor man. This is the kind of story that disappears if nobody watches it. Like and subscribe if you think it matters. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen an HD-41 in person? We have heard there are fewer than a dozen left. If you know where one is, we want to hear about it.